If you ask me to point to the exact moment I fell in love for the first time, I could. It was 11:12 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in Tokyo. I was 24, halfway through my exchange year at Waseda University. I was supposed to be focused on my thesis about post-war architecture, but instead, I was sitting under a pavilion in the university's garden, watching a girl sketch in the rain. She didn't know I was watching. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. That was part of what drew me in. Everyone else in that program was loud, trying to impress, constantly checking their phones. But not her. She looked like she lived in a different tempo, quiet, deliberate, a little older than her years. There was something haunting about her posture, like she was always preparing for goodbye. Her name was Aiko, she was 22, and by the time I realized I was in love with her, she was already halfway out of my life. The first time we spoke, I accidentally spilled green tea all over her sketch pad. I'd been watching her from across the courtyard. Again, my usual routine. But that day I'd worked up the nerve to walk over, say something clever, maybe compliment the way she drew people without ever looking at them directly. Instead, I tripped over my own backpack strap and launched my tea across her page. The delicate ink lines, what looked like a rooftop temple scene, smeared instantly. She just blinked. No gasp, no scolding. She looked at me like she'd already anticipated the disaster. I was done anyway, she said in a soft voice. I offered to buy her a new notebook. She refused. Then, right as I was about to walk away in awkward silence, she said, "But you can buy me a tea tomorrow." Same time. It felt like winning a lottery I hadn't entered. We started meeting at that same spot every Tuesday. She never talked much, at least not at first. But she listened better than anyone I'd ever met. When she finally spoke, her words were deliberate, like each one had been weighed and chosen with care. Sometimes she'd hum while sketching. Sometimes she'd ask me strange questions like, if you had to live in a building shaped like a memory, what would it look like? I never knew how to answer, but I never wanted to leave. Her laugh, when I finally heard it, sounded like someone letting go of a held breath. The shift between strangers and something more happened quietly. One night, after staying too long in the garden, I offered to walk her home. It was raining again. She didn't carry an umbrella, so we shared mine. The streets were glowing from neon signs, and the only sound was our shoes on the wet pavement and the distant sound of a train pulling away. When we reached her apartment, she turned and said, "I know you're not staying." I froze. "What do you mean?" "You're American," she said simply. "You'll go home soon." "I don't want to go home." That made her smile, for real, full-faced, rare. And then she kissed me. Not fast, not rushed, like she was giving me something she'd kept hidden for a long time. The next 3 months were a blur. She took me to a hidden ramen shop only locals knew. I took her to an open mic where I read a poem I wrote about her eyes. She hated the spotlight, but stayed the whole time. We rode a train to Kyoto on a whim and got caught in a festival we didn't understand but danced in anyway. She never introduced me to her parents. I didn't push. She had this way of holding her phone during our dates, face down, never checking it unless it buzzed more than once. I never questioned it until it was too late. One night in late March, I brought up the idea of staying in Tokyo longer, finding work, extending my visa, anything. I remember her going completely still. "You can't stay for me," she said. "You'll resent it, one day." "I want to stay for me. And, yes, for you." She didn't respond. I thought she just needed time. That we had time. I was wrong. 3 days later, she vanished. No text, no call, not even a goodbye. I went to our spot in the garden every day that week, then her apartment. It was empty. A neighbor said, "The diplomat's family moved. They never stay in one place long." I didn't know her dad was a diplomat. I didn't even know where they'd gone. All I had was her last drawing, still half finished in my sketchbook. A temple. A boy holding tea. A girl sitting alone looking toward a plane in the sky. That was 4 years ago. Last week, a package showed up at my apartment in Chicago. No return address. No note. At least not right away. Inside, a familiar leather sketchbook. And on the very last page, my name. Just that. Jamie, written in blue ink, in her handwriting. And beneath it, a Tokyo return address, I stared at that return address for hours, turning the sketchbook over in my hands like it might explain itself. My heart was pounding in that old, familiar way. Like I was 24 again, trying to find words to impress a girl who didn't speak unless she had something worth saying. I knew it was her handwriting. That looping capital J, the way she slanted the M slightly downward. It was exactly how she used to sign her notes when she left them tucked inside my textbooks. I hadn't seen that in 4 years. I didn't even realize how much I'd missed it. The address was in Shibuya, not far from where we used to meet. My first instinct was to hop on a plane and show up at her door, but I couldn't shake the question that had haunted me ever since she disappeared. Why now? Why reach out after vanishing like that? Without a goodbye? Why send me something so intimate, so obviously hers, and include no explanation? I called the number listed under the address. No answer. I searched the name on the building's mailbox through Japanese property records. Nothing. No Aiko, no family listings, no embassy ties. Just a small art studio registered under the name Okabe & Company. It wasn't much to go on, but it was something. I sent a message to a friend still living in Tokyo, Masato, a guy from our program who'd stayed behind to work in city planning. He owed me more than a few favors. I asked him to check out the studio for me. He agreed, reluctantly, probably thinking I'd gone a little crazy. "You sure this isn't just someone messing with you?" he texted. "Sketchbook, Jamie. That's old school even for you." But the next day his tone changed. "Dude, it's real. There's a girl working there. Doesn't go by Aiko, but I showed her your picture. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She didn't say anything, just walked to the back and didn't come out. That was all I needed. I booked a flight that night. 10 hours in the air gave me too much time to think. What was I even expecting? A grand reunion? A second chance? Closure? Part of me was terrified it was none of those things. Maybe she was married. Maybe she had a new life. Maybe this was her way of saying goodbye without really saying it. But I had to know. I landed in Tokyo early in the morning, the sky still gray and sleepy. The humidity hit me like a memory. Everything looked the same and different all at once, like returning to a dream I wasn't sure I'd actually had. I didn't go to a hotel. I went straight to the address. It was a small, unassuming building tucked between two cafes, with a faded sign that said Okabe & Company Custom Framing and Art Supply. I stepped inside. The place smelled like paint and cedarwood. A bell chimed overhead. And there she was, standing behind the counter, her back to me, framing a canvas in total silence. My throat tightened. I almost couldn't speak. "Aiko?" I said. She froze, turned slowly, and for a second, neither of us moved. Her hair was longer, she wore no makeup. Her hands were stained with blue pigment. But her eyes were the same. Wide, sharp, impossibly sad. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just said, "I hoped it would take you longer to find me." I blinked. "You sent me your address." "I sent you the sketchbook," she said. "The address was an accident. You think I wouldn't come?" She hesitated, then looked away. "I wasn't sure if I wanted you to." That hurt. More than I expected. But I couldn't get angry. "Not yet. Why did you leave?" I asked. Back then, her hands trembled slightly, resting on the frame's edge. "My father got reassigned. There wasn't time. He packed everything in 3 days. I begged him to let me say goodbye. He said no. You could have called, written, anything." "I did," she whispered, "but by the time I had the courage, it felt too late. You would have moved on. I thought disappearing would make it easier for both of us." "It didn't," I said. "Not for me." Silence stretched between us. Customers came and went behind me, and the city buzzed outside like nothing had changed. But in that moment, everything was bending back toward the person I used to be, and the girl I had never really let go of. "Can we talk?" I asked quietly. "Please." She looked at the sketchbook in my hand. Then she nodded, slowly. "After I close, there's a park down the street. Meet me there in an hour." And just like that, she turned back to her work, like she hadn't just split open the last 4 years of my life with a single look. I waited in that park like I used to wait for her in the garden back at Waseda, restless, overthinking, watching shadows stretch longer than they should. The sun had started to dip behind the low buildings, casting a soft orange glow over the gravel paths and benches. The air smelled faintly of summer jasmine, and the cicadas had just begun their chorus. I kept replaying her face from earlier, how unreadable she'd looked, how calm, like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on the center of my world. And yet, I wasn't angry. I was terrified. What if she told me she was seeing someone? What if she only agreed to talk because she wanted to shut the door for good? I was still clutching the sketchbook, and every time I flipped through it, I found new layers I hadn't seen before. Little details only she and I would understand. A steaming bowl of ramen under an archway. A sketch of my profile from behind while I read. A temple gate with the two of us walking beneath it, drawn so faintly I'd missed it the first time. These weren't just drawings, they were a story. Our story. Around 6:45, I saw her walking down the path. Same stride, same quiet presence, but something had shifted. She looked heavier. Not older, not sadder exactly. Just like she'd been carrying something for a long time and wasn't sure she was ready to set it down. She sat beside me on the bench, her hands folded neatly in her lap. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I don't know where to start." "How about why you sent me the sketchbook?" I asked gently. "Why now?" She closed her eyes. "Because you're the only person who ever really saw me. And because I thought I was over it, over us. But I wasn't. Not even close. You were gone for 4 years, Aiko. And I thought about you every day." Her voice was steady, but her fingers twitched as she spoke. I was in Paris, then Berlin, then back to Tokyo. Always moving, never unpacking. I tried to meet people. I even tried to forget you. But everything I made, every drawing, every sketch, it was always about you. I swallowed hard. I looked for you. For months. I know. I saw your emails. I just couldn't answer. Why? Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't fight harder to stay. Because I thought I ruined something rare, and I didn't think I deserved to get it back. I turned to her. "You still don't get it. I would have waited. I would have found a way." She looked at me then, really looked, and there were tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "You shouldn't have had to." "But I wanted to," I said. "You weren't a detour in my life. You were the direction." She covered her face with her hands for a moment, then let out a small laugh, half joy, half ache. "God, Jamie, I was so sure you hated me." "No," I said. "I hated not knowing. I hated that I never got to say goodbye." "Would it have helped?" she whispered. "If I had?" "I don't know. But this," I held up the sketchbook, "this brought everything back." She nodded, and we sat in silence again. The kind that didn't need filling. Then, softly, she said, "I still draw you, every week." I smiled. "I still write about you. I just never called it by your name." She turned to me, closer now, and there was that familiar tilt of her head, the one she always did right before she kissed me. "Do you think it's possible," she asked, "to love someone the same after so long apart?" I didn't hesitate. "No, I think you love them differently, maybe deeper, maybe more honestly. But never the same." She leaned in then, just slightly. Like the space between us didn't matter anymore, and I could feel it in my chest. That same breathless, terrifying rush I hadn't felt in years. But just before our lips met, she pulled back. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "Something important." My heart stopped. "What is it?" She looked down at her lap, then at me, eyes wide and vulnerable. "I'm leaving again. In 10 days. And just like that, everything tilted again. I felt the ground shift under me the second she said it. 10 days. That was all I had. After 4 years of silence, one surprise letter, a reunion that barely felt real yet, and now a countdown. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice tighter than I meant. "New York," she said quietly. "It's a year-long residency at a gallery that just opened in Soho. They've been following my work for a while, and they finally offered me a full studio and a stipend. It's everything I ever wanted." I should have been happy for her. and part of me was. But mostly I felt like I'd just found a lost part of myself, only to be told I had to give it back. "Why didn't you tell me when I walked into the shop?" I asked. "Because I didn't want it to scare you off," she said. "And I didn't want you to think this us was some temporary fantasy. I didn't plan for you to come. I didn't even plan to send the sketchbook. I missed you. I missed who I was with you." I sat back on the bench, the Tokyo skyline blurred behind her, and tried to make sense of the swirl in my head. My instincts were screaming, "Don't let her go again. Don't let history repeat itself." But the logical part of me, the one that had learned to stay calm, to protect itself, was whispering, "She left once. She might leave again." "What do you want from me, Aiko?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't even know what I want from myself. I just know that I needed to see you again. I needed to know if it was real, or if it was just something I'd built up in my head all these years." "And is it?" I asked. "Real?" She looked at me, and for a second, I saw the same girl from the garden bench years ago, the one who asked questions like riddles, and kissed like she was writing her name in the air. "More than ever," she said. That night, we walked through Shibuya in near silence, but every time our shoulders brushed, I felt something in me uncoil. We didn't talk about New York. We didn't talk about what 10 days meant. We just walked until the crowds thinned and the city calmed. I walked her home. She paused at her door. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. I nodded. Inside, the apartment was tiny and minimalist. Just one room, a low bed, a stack of sketch pads by the window. She lit a single candle and pulled the curtains closed. And then, without another word, she wrapped her arms around me and held on like she'd been waiting years to exhale. We didn't rush. Everything was slow, deliberate, like unwrapping a memory we didn't want to tear. We lay there afterward, side by side, staring at the ceiling in the dim candlelight. "I don't know what happens next," I said quietly. "Neither do I," she whispered. "But maybe it doesn't have to be all or nothing." "What does that mean?" "Maybe we don't have to decide everything right now. Maybe we just make the most of these 10 days. And then, we see." I turned my head toward her. "And if I don't want to let you go again?" She looked back, her eyes soft and searching. "Then maybe you won't have to." But she didn't say more than that. And I didn't press. Because part of me was afraid the answer would ruin everything. So we fell asleep, tangled in silence and the heaviness of time, knowing we were racing a clock neither of us could control. And somewhere in the early morning hours while she slept, I sat up and stared at her, wondering if love was worth this much uncertainty, wondering if this time, finally, I was strong enough not to lose her again. The next morning, I woke up before her. The sun was leaking through the edges of her curtains, catching in the strands of her hair, and for a moment I just lay there, memorizing the shape of her shoulders, the rise and fall of her breath. I wanted to freeze time. I wanted to stay in that apartment, in that moment, forever. But time didn't care. 10 days had already become 9. When she finally stirred, she didn't open her eyes right away. Instead, she whispered, "You're staring." "I'm allowed," I said. "Not if you're thinking sad thoughts." I smiled, though the weight in my chest didn't lift. "I was thinking about coffee," I lied. She finally opened her eyes and gave me that small, sideways grin I remembered so well. Liar. We spent the day like we were in a dream. We went to the museum where we used to sit and make up stories about the people in the paintings. We found the bridge near the river where she once dared me to jump in on a freezing night. And I actually did. We didn't talk much about the future, but the air between us was thick with it. Every gesture felt a little sharper, every look a little longer. Like we both knew we were writing something we'd have to read from a distance. That evening, we had dinner at a rooftop bar near the Sumida River. The city was glowing, boats drifting lazily below us. She ordered plum wine. I ordered sake. We clinked glasses without a word. After a long silence, she said, "When I left, I told myself if I ever saw you again, I'd tell you something I never said before." I looked at her. "What?" She stared at her glass, swirling the liquid. "That I loved you. Back then. Completely. I was just too afraid to say it. I thought love was supposed to come after everything else made sense. And I didn't make sense. Not then. My throat closed up. You don't have to explain. But I want to, she said. You deserve to know. You always did. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was shaking slightly. I loved you too, still do. She looked up, eyes glossy. Then come with me. It was barely a whisper, but it landed like a thunderclap. I blinked. To New York? She nodded. I know it's crazy. I know it's too soon. But what if it's not? What if this is the part where we stop being afraid of the timing? My mind scrambled. My job in Chicago, my lease, my family, everything I'd built since losing her. But it all felt small compared to the girl in front of me, the one who'd lived in my ribs for 4 years without even trying. You're asking me to uproot my whole life, I said. I'm asking if you want to build a new one, she replied. With me. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But the fact that I didn't say no told me everything I needed to know. We finished our drinks in silence, hands still clasped across the table, both of us pretending the city wasn't spinning around us like a roulette wheel. That night, I lay awake beside her while she slept, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. Could I really follow her across the world again? Could I take that leap, this time without a net? I didn't know. But I did know this. If I didn't try, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. And I wasn't sure I could survive losing her twice. The next morning, I woke to find her already up, standing barefoot in the kitchen, in one of my old college shirts she'd kept all these years. She was pouring tea, staring out the window, humming something I couldn't place. For a moment, I didn't say anything, I just watched. And in that quiet, I realized I'd never stopped picturing a future with her. Not once. Even when I dated other people. Even when I told myself I was over her. Even when I convinced myself she'd forgotten me. After breakfast, we didn't talk about New York. Not directly. But everything we did seemed to orbit around it. She showed me her latest sketches, portraits of strangers on subway platforms, skyline studies, pages and pages of faceless figures that looked eerily like me. I helped her carry canvases down to her studio and watched her paint for hours, hypnotized by the way she moved. She was calmer now than she had been in college, more focused. But she still had that same intensity when she worked, like the world outside disappeared the moment she picked up a brush. Around noon, we grabbed lunch from a noodle stand and walked through Yoyogi Park. The cherry blossoms were starting to bloom early this year, another reminder that life moves fast whether you're ready or not. I told my parents about you, she said suddenly, breaking a long stretch of silence. I blinked. You did? Yeah, she said. Back when we were together, they didn't approve, not because you're American, not exactly, but because they thought I was too young, too focused on love. They wanted me to follow the diplomatic track, not chase drawings and poetry and you. That's why you never introduced me. She nodded, looking ashamed. I thought I was protecting you, but I think I was just afraid to stand up for what I wanted. What do they think now? I asked. She shrugged. We don't talk much anymore, not about personal things. They know I'm going to New York, but they don't know I sent you the sketchbook, or that you're here. Would they care? I asked. She hesitated. Maybe, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not that girl anymore. I don't need their permission to love who I love. That hit me harder than I expected, because I knew how hard that was for her to say, and maybe even harder to believe. That evening, I called my boss. I told him I needed an urgent leave of absence. I lied and said it was a family emergency. He didn't ask questions. I had just enough vacation days saved to stretch 2 weeks, maybe 3. It wasn't a decision yet, but it was the start of one. When I told Aiko, her expression changed. Not surprised, not ecstatic, just soft, like she'd been holding her breath and could finally exhale. Thank you, she said. You don't have to decide right now, but thank you. That night we lay on her rooftop, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. Do you ever think about the version of us that didn't break apart? I asked. All the time, she said. But I think I like this version better. We survived more. We know what we almost lost. I turned to her. Then let's not lose it again. She nodded, and for once, there were no more questions between us. Just the quiet, steady beat of two hearts learning how to sync again. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were finally on the same page, even if we didn't know what the ending looked like yet. The next few days passed like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. We stopped counting. No more talk of 7 left or 5 more. It was easier to pretend time had slowed just for us, like we were stealing moments from the universe. Every morning started the same. Aiko in the kitchen humming to herself, 2 mismatched mugs of tea, sunlight cutting across the tatami floor. I helped her pack up her studio, little by little, and each painting felt like closing a door she'd left open too long. She gave some away to local cafes and friends. Others she wrapped in brown paper and labeled in her neat handwriting. Soho, Gallery, Opening Series. She let me keep one, a portrait of a man in profile, half in shadow, his eyes looking off the canvas toward something you couldn't quite see. "It's you," she said, handing it to me like it was nothing. The version of you that waited. On the 6th night, we visited the university campus. It was mostly empty, save for a few late-night students and quiet laughter in the distance. The old pavilion was still there. The bench still creaked the same way. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to me. "What's this?" I asked. "A letter," she said. "The one I wrote 4 years ago. I never sent it." My hands trembled as I opened it. The ink had faded a little, but her voice was all over it. She'd written about the garden, our first kiss, the way I made her laugh when I danced like a fool in the Kyoto rain. But what broke me was the last line. "I'm not brave enough to ask you to follow me, but I hope you do it anyway." I looked at her, tears catching in the corners of my eyes. "Why didn't you send it?" "Because I thought I didn't deserve to ask you for anything." I folded the letter and tucked it in my jacket. "You're allowed to ask me for anything, Aiko, always." She leaned against my shoulder, and for the first time I felt her weight not as something fragile, but something rooted. She wasn't floating anymore. She was staying, even if only in spirit. That night, back in her apartment, we didn't sleep. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. About what scared us, what healed us, who we were now versus who we were then. At one point, I asked, "Do you believe people are meant for each other?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I think some people are just unfinished without the other." That stayed with me. It still does. And maybe that's what this was. 2 people who'd been paused mid-sentence, finally learning how to write the rest. The next morning, I checked flights. I didn't tell her yet. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to know I wasn't just chasing nostalgia, but building something real. And as I stared at the ticket to New York, hovering over the purchase button, I asked myself one question. Would I rather risk everything and fall, or wonder forever what could have been? I bought the ticket. One way. Chicago to New York, 3 days after Aiko's arrival. It felt terrifyingly real the second the confirmation email landed in my inbox, like I'd just tipped a row of dominoes that couldn't be stopped. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my friends, not even my landlord. I wasn't ready to explain something I was still figuring out myself. That night, I showed her the ticket. She didn't cry or gasp or throw her arms around me like in some movie. She just exhaled and whispered, "Thank you." Then she took my face in her hands and kissed me so softly I thought my heart would crack open. The next few days became their own kind of countdown, but gentler now, less frantic. We moved through the city like it belonged to us again. We ate from our favorite food stalls, visited used bookstores, wandered temples without saying a word. One afternoon, we took the train to the coast and stood on the edge of the water while she sketched the horizon. I didn't know what she was drawing until she turned the pad around. It was me, standing beside her, both of us looking out, faceless, anonymous to the world, but not to each other. "It's our beginning," she said, "not our goodbye." On her final night in Tokyo, we hosted a small dinner on the rooftop, just a few old friends, candles in jars, food wrapped in newspaper. She wore a blue dress I'd never seen before, and I couldn't stop staring. She looked like someone who belonged anywhere she stood. When everyone left, we stayed up. watching the city lights flicker and fade. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," she said. "So am I. What if it doesn't work? What if we're chasing a feeling that can't survive real life?" "Then we tried," she said. "We loved the best way we knew how. And that matters more than being right." We held each other in silence, listening to Tokyo breathe beneath us. In the morning, I walked her to the train station. Her flight was at noon. She insisted on going alone, not because she wanted distance, but because she didn't want either of us sobbing in public. Still, when the train doors opened and she stepped inside, she hesitated. Just a beat. And in that tiny space of hesitation, I saw everything. Our past, our possible futures, all of it compressed into one silent look. She pressed her hand to the window. I mirrored it. Then the train pulled away, and just like that, she was gone again. But this time, I wasn't left behind. I had a ticket in my inbox, a new path in front of me, and a heart finally brave enough to follow it. Back in the apartment, I found a note on my pillow. It said, "Jamie, if you still want me after New York's chaos and cheap coffee and noisy neighbors, I'll be waiting at the corner of Orchard and 3rd, sketchbook in hand, 8 a.m., 3 Sundays from now. If you don't come, I'll understand. But I hope you do. Love, Aiko." I stared at that note for a long time, memorizing every curve of her handwriting, every space between the words. I didn't need 3 Sundays. I already knew. 3 Sundays came and went faster than I expected. Life in Chicago unraveled like an old sweater, one pulled thread at a time. I gave notice at work, packed up my apartment, sold most of my furniture, and boxed the rest. People asked questions, of course. Some friends cheered me on. Others looked at me like I'd lost my mind. But I didn't care. There was a calm in the chaos, like everything I was shedding had already expired. On the flight to New York, I held her note in my jacket pocket, folded so many times the creases had begun to fade. I read it again and again, mouthing the words like a prayer. When the plane touched down, I felt something click into place. It wasn't certainty. It was surrender, the good kind. The kind that means you're finally done fighting what your heart already knows. I stayed with a friend for a few nights in Brooklyn, got a cheap temporary phone, and lined up a few freelance architecture gigs to float me until I figured out something permanent. But mostly, I counted days. And then, the morning of the 3rd Sunday, I got up at 6, showered, put on the navy sweater she always said made my eyes look bluer, and walked to Orchard and 3rd. The sky was clear, crisp, the kind of cold that wakes you up without needing coffee. I arrived early, 10 minutes, then 15. I stood by the light post, hands tucked in my pockets, heart thudding so loud I could feel it in my ears. And then, just like that, she appeared. Hair tied up messily, sketchbook tucked under her arm, a coffee in her hand. No grand entrance, no drama, just her, as real as I'd ever seen her. Our eyes met, and something behind mine cracked wide open. She stopped a few feet away, tilted her head slightly, just like she used to when studying a new canvas, and whispered, "You came." I nodded, speechless. "You really came." I walked forward, closed the distance, and pulled her into me. No words, no explanation, just the warmth of someone who'd been gone too long, returning to where they were always meant to be. She smelled like citrus and charcoal. Her arms tightened around my back like she didn't trust time not to steal me again. Finally, she leaned back, looked up at me, and smiled. "I've got a studio. It's tiny, loud neighbors, terrible heating. Want to see it?" "Only if there's tea," I said. "There's always tea," she replied. We walked back together, our hands brushing, then locking, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Her building was old brick, 4th floor walk-up, no elevator. But inside, the walls were covered in sketches and pinned photographs and paint-streaked post-it notes. It felt like home. She showed me the couch where I'd be crashing temporarily, then pulled out a folded map from a drawer. "I've marked every art supply store and every ramen place worth our time," she said. "You planned for this?" I asked, teasing. "I hoped," she answered. That night, we sat on the floor eating cheap noodles out of takeout boxes, laughing over nothing. music playing softly in the background. I looked around at the mess, the mismatched furniture, the buzzing radiator, and I realized I didn't miss Chicago at all. Later, when we climbed into the too small bed and she curled into my chest like we'd never been apart, she whispered, "Let's not waste time wondering this time. Let's just live it." I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "I already am." A year later, I'm writing this from a crooked little desk in the corner of our Brooklyn apartment. The one where the windows stick in the winter and the pipes knock like ghosts when the heat kicks on. Aiko is asleep on the couch behind me, sketchbook open on her stomach, pencil still in her hand. She always falls asleep mid-line, mid-thought, mid-magic. There are canvases stacked in every corner now, each one a moment frozen in color. Our walk through Prospect Park during the first snow, the night we danced on the fire escape when the power went out, a portrait of me reading on the floor with takeout spread around me like a picnic. We didn't build a perfect life. We built a real one. We argue sometimes, usually about dumb things like whether the soy sauce should go in the fridge or the cabinet, or whether her music is too loud while I'm trying to work. But even the arguments feel different. Softer, like they come with the unspoken promise that we're both still here, still choosing this. Aiko's residency turned into a long-term collaboration with the gallery, and she just sold her first full collection last month. I picked up steady freelance design work, and I'm helping renovate a brownstone across town with a friend. We still eat too much ramen. We still walk the city like it belongs to us. And sometimes, we still go quiet at night, sitting on the fire escape, watching the streetlight flicker below us, saying nothing, because nothing needs to be said. Last week, I found the old sketchbook she mailed me, the one that started all this. Tucked inside was something I'd missed the first time, a folded note behind the last page, taped shut. I opened it slowly, carefully, like it might crumble if I breathed too hard. It read, "If we ever find our way back to each other, let's never let go again. Let's not let fear write the ending this time. Let's write it ourselves." I folded it back up and slid it into my wallet. It lives there now, right behind my Metro card, like a compass I didn't know I needed. People ask how we made it work after all that time apart. I never really know how to answer. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's timing, maybe it's just love that refused to fade. But I think it's this. We chose each other. Again and again. Even when it was hard. Even when it didn't make sense. We chose to believe that love doesn't always arrive when it's convenient. But if you're brave enough, you meet it anyway. And if you're really lucky, it stays.